So evangelism, why do it? Matthew 28, so Great Commission. All right.
You gonna let the rest of the people go to hell?
Okay, so there's lost people all around.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Are we talking about like stone cold evangelism or like relational? Stone cold or like the warm?
Well, what is evangelism?
What is like?
Well, someone define evangelism for me.
So it's just participating in the Great Commission, where we're just to go out to the nations and spread the life and words of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So was there a category on there that was like evangelism is only like, but only if it's relational or only if it's stone cold?
Battlefield, like you got to be like a wall. It's like wrestling. Headstrong.
Well, my point is, right, in your definition, it's not a certain kind, right? So it's not just relational or just, cold stone, right? It's any type of sharing the gospel with anyone in any scenario would be our definition of evangelism from the Bible, right? So that would be my answer, is we're talking about any type. Yeah. So is there any more? So Great Commission, right? Any other answers on why we should do this? Yes.
Blessed are the feet of those who carry the good news. It's sanctifying for us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So another question I think that's important with this one is, why do you exist? So,
Bring glory to God.
okay, to bring glory to God. Enjoy him forever. John Piper. Get out. Okay, so right in there would be basically you exist for a relationship with God, right? To enjoy him, glorify him through that, right? So we would all agree all humans exist for that reason, right? They exist. Their purpose is to live in relationship with their Creator. So that's the answer for all humans. Now, once you become a Christian, right? So you have that relationship with God. Why do you exist here? Why are you still here?
As in, like, why do we not go straight up to heaven as soon as we're saved?
Yeah. What's your purpose of still being here?
To make his name and glory known among the nations.
Okay.
And
Sanctification? Yes.
I think 6 Luke talks about bringing others home to your home country with you. That it's not your own home country, it's everyone's home country.
Yeah.
For faith in Christ.
I love that. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So I think, while I agree, right, so the first kind of answer, like where we exist to, glorify God and enjoy him forever. I agree that's why, that's why we exist, right, for a relationship and enjoy him and glorify him forever. But we could do that a lot better if God just took us up, right, as soon as we're saved, right? So all of those things, they're great, like and sanctification was another answer that was given, right? But all those things, getting closer to Christ, becoming, right, as soon as you become a Christian, you want to become like Christ, right? You want to be sanctified. Well, that could have been accomplished right away if God had taken you up, right? And so the only thing I can think of that you can't do when you go to heaven that you can do now is reach the lost, right? So may not be the only reason you're still, but I think it may be. I think it's the main one why we're still here, right? Because food would be better up in heaven. You wouldn't have to struggle against sin up in heaven. You'd be in perfect relationship with God in heaven. Everything else, right, would not only you be able to do it, but you're able to do it better, perfectly, right? And so my point is really like, I think it's hard to make an argument that we're here for much other than this overarching purpose to reach the lost. That's why you're here. That's why God didn't take you up to heaven when you were saved. Yes, question or comments?
Well, we're here to test your faith, not only of whether you believe in Jesus or not, but we talked about in James, perseverance to, you may believe God's there, but is God really listening to me? Is God going to act? Is he going to interact? Is he going to help? So it's a constant
Yeah, it certainly is. And I don't know if that would be a reason why God would still keep us here, because he would know, right? He would know that whether your faith is genuine or not, and whether you would stand by him. But that's definitely part of what we go through when we're here. And did you have okay? But yeah, so my kind of argument here is that this is we neglect this, but this is if not the only reason, it's the huge reason why we're still here, is to reach the lost. That's why we exist. And so everything we do in life as Christians has to be filtered through that. Like what you do with your profession, what you do with your free time, who you decide to marry, right? All these decisions. So, and I told Aaron I would tie in dating. Yeah. No, but this helps clear up so much for us, right, guys? Because we're the only people who can say we get our why from the creator of the universe himself. We know why we're here. And so we have a framework of making decisions, right? Should I do that? Well, no, it doesn't fit with why I'm here. Should I marry this person? No, it doesn't fit with why I'm here. That person isn't going to help me love God and reach out and love the lost, right? And so this just clarifies so much for us, and for some reason, I just see so many Christians just throw this. They don't go by this. They just throw it away, and they're just like, what do I do? But you have it. You have the answer of why you're here, and so let's live like it. Yeah. Okay, but how? Right? That's the next question, right? We get it. It's important. Okay, but how? And so that's kind of the focus. I mean, you guys get a lot of information and politics stuff. My focus tonight is really to encourage you and challenge you and try and help a little bit with the how, of giving you some tools for that. And so Greg Koukl, who's heard of Greg Koukl tactics? Yeah. So he talks about 3 characteristics of what it takes to be an effective ambassador for Christ. And the first one is character. So character, someone define character for me real quick.
Every motivational poster in middle school.
Attributes that make up who you are.
Okay, the attributes that make up who you are. Yeah. Who you demonstrate yourself to be, right? What your actions say about who you are really is kind of in sum. So character, you need to have character that is becoming of someone who follows Christ, right? If you don't have character, that breaks your whole mission, right? You're preaching this, but you're not actually living like you believe it. And people can see right through that. So the next one he talks about is knowledge. I won't ask you guys to define that. It's just you know something. So who here knows the gospel? Okay, you have knowledge. You have something that you can share with someone else, right? And I know a lot of you have a lot of other knowledge too, and you have access. If you don't have it, you have access to getting that knowledge in this type of group. So we're not really focused on that. So the other one's wisdom, and this is what we're really focusing on tonight. If it'll come up, yeah, wisdom. So what is wisdom?
Making good decisions based on your knowledge.
Okay. Making good decisions.
Knowledge into action, doing something with that knowledge.
All right. Yeah. I like that. What did you say?
Well, I said get your actions from your character.
How are you tying that to?
Oh, because it just sounded like he was saying you get your wisdom from your knowledge.
Oh.
Knowledge from your character.
They're definitely related, right? Well, the type of knowledge you seek after will have your character will have something to do with the type of knowledge you end up wanting to obtain, right? And then the knowledge you have will end up how you want to use that, right? But wisdom really is just using how you use that knowledge, right? To use it wisely, to use it well, right? And so that's kind of what we're focusing on, because I can't make all of you perfect Christians with the first one tonight, character, and I can't give you all the knowledge you ever will need tonight either. So I can't give you all the wisdom you'll need tonight either. But so I kind of put myself in a trap there. But I can that's kind of the focus, to try and just give you a few things that I've found helpful with applying this stuff. My clicker's being weird. But first, 3 lies. So we kind of talked about one of these actually briefly already. And this is this one. And the reason why I want to talk about these is these can be obstacles to just like anything I'm sharing tonight. So I just want to get them out of the way. So first lie is you need to have a relationship with someone to share the gospel with them. Does anyone want to explain why that's an awful lie?
Paul didn't have relationships with people when he shared the gospel with them, especially when he was in Greece and Athens. They told him to stay quiet, and then he started roaming the streets and preaching the gospel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the most important point, is we don't see that in the Bible, right? There's definitely relational aspects, right? And Jesus is relational, how he reaches out to people. And there's times where they do have a relationship with someone and share the gospel through that relationship. But there's lots of times where they're just preaching it to people who they had never met until that moment, right? And in fact, a lot of the book of Acts is like that. Yeah.
I would also say, just to kind of turn that to a point as well, that the gospel doesn't require your relationship with someone to be effective. That's right.
Yes. Yeah, that was kind of my next point I was going to do that, is this really puts yourself on a pedestal. It's like, you know, God can save them, but not until I have a relationship with them first, right? It's not going to be effective unless they know me. Yeah, it makes it contingent on you, which is really a dangerous place to be. I don't even know why you'd want to put that on yourself, right? Like, it's my relationship that's going to save. That really puts the onus on you, which is not biblical at all. And so it's just not true. It's not that relationships can't help, right? And God can't use that, because God can use many things to draw people to him, but it's not necessary. And the thing is too, is you can have a lot more gospel conversations with people in your life than you can have relationships with people. So you're limiting the effectiveness that God wants to use you for if you just limit it to people you have relationships with. So yes, build relationships, share the gospel with relationships, but also just have conversations with people, because it's not based on, the power of God is not based on your relationship with someone. So other one, you can't argue someone into the kingdom. Well, sure you can. Happens all the time. J. Warner Wallace is an example of this, of being convinced, right, through argument. God can use that, just like he can use a relationship, just like he can use a simple gospel presentation without any relationship or any argument, right? Yes?
I've heard people who are like, have authority and like religion say things such as like, you have to go through someone's emotional heart to get them to the kingdom. Is there even biblical evidence for that? Because this is saying this has an argument, but I hear a lot of people saying, oh no, it has to be through the heart, it has to be through emotions. Is there, was that a question?
Well, yeah, I would ask, I think we're going to kind of address that, but I would ask, what do they mean by that exactly?
I've heard people say, you can't, like this lie, you can't argue someone into the kingdom, you have to go through their heart. And so, like, is there biblical information that you have to deal with someone's heart and like, you specifically?
Can't think of any verse that says you need to specifically somehow, I don't even understand how that works. Like, if you're communicating with someone, you can't communicate just to their heart. It's impossible.
Yeah.
They're hearing with their brain, their mind. Yes.
Well, and if it's about emotion, I think that would delegitimize people who didn't have emotional conversions. It almost sort of invalidates their experience, like C.S. Lewis, who did not have an emotional conversion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is normalize your conversion as this the way everybody's doing it. So for everybody, for some
Right.
people, they need a hug. For some people, they need an argument.
Yeah.
And what you don't want to do is to think that
Hug and
everybody
then argue.
Yeah, both.
When I first met Aaron, you need a hug.
He needed ice cream.
We're both satisfied.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what exactly that would mean, to only like address the heart. I don't think you can divorce the two, but there's certainly some, Paul says, I'll be all things to all people so that I may, win some to Christ. And so, if that person may not need an intellectual argument, and they might need, a loving, a hug or just care, right? Or someone to listen. And that's an apologetic too. I mean, I think we need to kind of broaden the idea that like apologetic is just like, we've narrowed it to like it's just intellectual. No, like there's something convincing to that person about that love you showed them and they're thinking about it. So either way, you're still thinking about it and you're thinking, wow, why did, they loved Jesus and they cared for me in that way. Maybe I should consider this more.
Yeah, I would argue nothing goes to the heart without first going through the mind. Without first going through the head in some way. And some people need more mind convincing than others, and others don't.
Yeah.
I think everything goes through the mind first.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, because even the person who's just like needs your love or like caring for them, they're still thinking, is this genuine?
Yep.
Is this person just fake or doing this for another reason? They still, before they can take it for what it is, they're still evaluating, is this genuine or do they have some other motivating? So I absolutely agree. So yeah, that's another lie that holds people back from being effective. Then the last one is, if it comes up, I'm not qualified. So who wants to take that one down for me real quick?
Can I say one thing? Because I think going back to your last point,
Yeah.
when you can't argue somebody in the kingdom, a lot of people think that what we're doing is looking out and going to argue with people, like just getting in these big arguments. Well, classically, we just mean making a case, giving reasons for it. So we're not going out and brother Rossing people, just like
Brother Rossing.
Yeah.
like we're not trying to do that. We're trying to make a winsome case for the true claims of Christianity, which is very different than just getting into an argument. So I have to make sure.
Yeah, I'm not using that as the negative way that our culture defines. An argument is just making a case, right? Explaining why you believe this. It's dignifying if you're doing it right. But anyway, people would say even that type you can't use. You can't reason someone into the kingdom. It's just not true. God, and why, right? It's because reason is in correspondent to God's nature, right? So is love, right? So is the gospel. So he's pleased to use those, and usually he's using more than one of them at a time. So just wanted to cover those real quick, and I gotta speed up now. So I'm going to talk really quickly about my approach. All right. So I've been doing this I've been doing like cold turkey evangelism, like street apologetics, basically. On a pretty regular basis for about 5 years or so. So I've had lots of conversations, failed a ton, and was just awful at it when I first, and scared to death when I first started doing it. So like, it's not, that's one like side thing, is like, this is not like a special gift you need to have innately. Like it's really, to me, it's much more of a skill, or like something you have to just do, right? And you'll learn from it. Just like, in sanctification, like it's not just magically in you, you have to work at it. If you work at it and you actually do it, you'll get better at it. But anyway, this is kind of what I use when I go and talk to people on campus. And we do this weekly with my group up there. And usually I'll just be like, hey, what's up? My name's Aaron. How's it going?
Hi.
What's your name?
I'm Ken.
Nice to meet you, Ken. So we're just going around and we're curious about what people think on campus about the big questions of life. Do you have time for a few questions to give your opinion on the big questions of life?
Yeah, sure.
All right, awesome. Can I sit down? Let's go. All right. So that's typically how it goes. People are kind of give you an odd look, like he kind of did because he wasn't expecting it. They kind of give you an odd look right at first, but when you put your hand out to shake theirs, it's an automatic reaction. You shake, they shake your hand, you ask them what their name is, and you're off to the races. And this approach has like a 95% success rate. Like the only time it doesn't work generally is like if someone genuinely has something they have to go do.
What do you mean by success?
I mean, like, as far as they don't say, no, I don't want to talk. Yeah, like you're in the conversation. You're having, and usually then, before I jump into like the questions, usually, I ask them, what are you studying, right? What year are you? Stuff like that to kind of break the ice just briefly.
Well, how would that work with, or that particular tactic work with folks who are like always in a rush and busy? So like the folks in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time.
This is very much based on I'm on a college campus, right? generally you have a choice in the environment you are to see who's busy and who's not. And so I just always go for the people who aren't busy. Like I genuinely, like, I'm walking around the student union or on campus and I see that person has earbuds in, they're on their laptop, probably not going to talk to them. Okay, there's someone who's clearly doesn't really have anything to do, probably, so I'm going to go approach them. So it's just kind of using like common sense with that. And this really like works like to start a conversation. A lot of it's body language too. You have to, like, even if you're not confident, you have to act like you're confident because people feed off your body language. If you feel awkward about this or feel weird about it, they're going to feel awkward and weird about it. If you don't, they'll be like, oh, that's weird, some stranger, but okay. Yeah. Like, and it's, people are like, sure, and they're curious. And sometimes they even think like I'm doing it for a class or something. But yeah, I mean, we usually do this in pairs, so I'm usually with one other person. But it really works. And you can tailor your own, but this works great. And so from there, the first question I usually ask is, in your opinion, where did the universe come from? That's usually the first like big question I ask them after like kind of the small talk, and we're actually getting into the big questions. The reason I ask this one is because it's not super personal. So they're not like, whoa, how dare you ask me that question? Sometimes they'll be like, whoa, that's a big question, bro. Like, that's so deep. But like we get that, but it's not like, oh, how dare you, answer, how dare you ask this question? That's so personal. Because it's not that personal. It's just, where do you think the universe came from, in your opinion? And so typical responses I get is like, God, I don't know, Big Bang. We get a ton of I don't know. That's a really big one, like very agnostic at Appalachian State. And obviously the relevant evidence with that is, Big Bang and cosmological argument. But I always ask them their opinion, and then I always ask them to clarify, like, what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion, right? And so I really try and understand what their position is on that. But it's really, these questions are going to help because they lead into each other. Because usually this question sometimes I already get the answer to this one. Because my next question is, does God exist? Why or why not? And I get their opinion on that. And usually from their first answer, I already kind of know, or they've already answered it. But now I can get more in depth of like why, if they think it's a God, why they think it's a God, or why don't they think there is a God. And so always ask them that, and then I ask them why, right? And really understand their opinion. Typical responses are yes, no, and I'm not sure. It's really in depth, I mean. Anyway, those are kind of I don't have a quotation mark for one of them, for two of them. Wait, for one of them. Yeah, no, for two of them. Anyway, but yeah, we get a lot of I'm not sure with this one. I think we get that one more than no, and probably maybe close to more than yes now. But there is a lot of people who say yes, but they're just not taking a position on it. So, relevant evidence is cosmological argument, teleological, moral argument, act. Not really getting into those tonight. But really, this is still all like kind of information seeking. I'm not really like getting into a huge debate or anything with these yet. And then the next one is, in your opinion, do you see how this is getting more and more personal? Now it's, in your opinion, who was Jesus and what did he do? Did he rise from, and then follow-up questions are, did he rise from the dead? Is he God? So if I'd started with that, probably not going to get the best reaction at first because it's that one's more personal. But because we already talked about the universe, and from there it wasn't too much of a jump to talk about God. And then once we're talking about God, it's not too much a jump to talk about Jesus, right? We're in the Bible Belt. It's kind of slowly moving more personal. And so now, in your opinion, who was Jesus? What do you think he did? And follow-up questions I make sure to ask, because they usually don't clarify. I said, do you think he rose from the dead? And then why or why not? And then some people will say he rose from the dead and he's the Son of God, but then I'll ask them, is he God? And they'll say no. So that's why I have that last one, does that make him God, right? If you say Son of God. So that's an interesting thing. But typically, these are the typical responses. I need to kind of speed up with these. There's a relevant evidence. This is not really part of my presentation. I kind of copy and paste this from another presentation I do. But you guys talk about this stuff, this type of evidence for the resurrection here. And if you've been part of this group for any amount of time, you've heard it. And if you're new, you're going to hear it again. But I love using like James and making that interactive and saying, do you have a brother? And they'll be, or a sibling? And they'll be like, yeah, well, let's say your brother told you he was God. What would it take for you to believe him? And they'd be like, oh, I would never believe that. I'd be like, well, that's exactly the position James was in. And so you can make these interactive, especially those last two with Paul and James. So last one is, in your opinion, what does it take for a person to get to heaven? And so this is really, generally, like, I'm only going to ask this question if they aren't like a hard atheist. If they're hard atheists, I'm going to ask a follow-up question about the universe or the God question or Jesus, talk about the evidence for the resurrection, ask them about that. But these are really to help me once I'm through really those first three questions, but this one helps if they believe in a God and they have the right answer about Jesus, but then this shows whether they actually know it's through faith and not like through works, because sometimes they'll answer correctly with all the first three, then they'll give like a works answer. But anyway, really after the first three questions, I know what their worldview is. Like I pretty much know where they are at with their worldview, and it's just a few questions. So typical response to these: good person, works, faith. No, there's no heaven, right? And then share the gospel. I usually ask, can I share with you how the Bible answers that question? And usually people will say sure. But this is really, generally I get to this when someone does believe there's a God, right? And just didn't have the right, and believes Jesus is, you're safe, Jesus is, the Son of God, or he's God. And they just didn't give the right answer. They don't know how to be saved, right? Somehow they missed that, which is sad, but it happens in our churches. But anyway, so that's kind of my approach. This doesn't have to be your approach, but this works as far as it's a good structure to start with, I think, and then you can kind of make it your own and add your own stuff. But it's really those just 4 questions, and you just if you know anything, you don't really have to know anything to have a productive conversation with this, honestly. At least you can already start understanding like what someone's believing and ask them questions about it. So this is just the easiest way for me to organize this. These are kind of just like my 10 things that I kind of take that I think I've learned for doing evangelism over like the past 5 years. And so we have 15 minutes or so. So I got to get through these. But these are kind of just principles that I've really just discovered. You just discover them from experience that are important. And so first one is ask questions instead of making statements. If you can ask a question instead of making a statement, do it. Why do I say that? Why do I say don't make statements if you don't have to?
You have to defend it.
Okay, one, you have to defend it, right?
Threatening, I think if you're making statements, it can be.
Yeah, people get
Willing to engage in a discussion. It's more like, I'm going to tell you.
Yes, people get defensive when you make a statement, even if they want to have the conversation, even if they stay in the conversation. When you make a statement, even if it's not mean or in any way, as soon as you make a statement that contradicts what they think, their instant reaction is, how do I scramble to respond to that statement? So you're already limiting the productiveness of that conversation. You might have like an hour-long conversation after that, but the whole time from that point forward is them wanting to defend their turf because you responded with another claim to their claim. Right? You made a statement. And so that's just the way it is. Like if I tell Aaron he's an idiot, he's going to I made a statement and he's going to try and defend himself and respond, right? If I say, Aaron, have you considered that maybe you aren't now? But anyway, this is just you can almost always make the same point or go the same direction with a question instead of a statement, right? Instead of saying, there's all this evidence for the resurrection, let me tell it all to you. You can say, that's interesting that you don't think Jesus rose from the dead. Have you ever considered that? Sorry. How do you square that, with the fact that there's so many people who saw him alive after his death? Something like that. So you're formulating it in a question instead of making the statement. And so that invites them into, the other reason for this is that it's interactive and invites them into the thought process. And it's more coming alongside of them instead of attacking them.
And
Yeah.
also building on John's point, they're the one doing all the work.
Yes.
I don't like to, you might be afraid to evangelize because you might have all these things you don't know the answer to. If you can say, what do you mean by that? And
Yep.
come to that conclusion, you can
Yep, there's so many benefits to asking questions instead of making statements. So many reasons to do it. Yes?
I think our inclination would be to make statements because of those fears that we have. We want to be, we want to see ourselves as we can do this, we're good enough.
Yep.
We have all the answers, because it's more about us if we're honest with ourselves than about the person we're talking to.
Yep. Yep. And it's especially hard when the answer. You're like, I know it. And I'm awful. I don't do this personally at all. I'm awful with this. I'll make statements all the time when I should have asked a question, because it's it's like our inclination, oh, I know that. I want to say it. But it's hard. It's mentally, it takes more work for us to think of it in a question. So really, for me, I have to kind of think through how before, I can't sometimes, I can in conversation, but it's better if you think through how, or you learn from the conversation, say, how could I have said that with a question, so you're prepared for next time and you don't have to do it in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, I think it shows that you're really willing to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're genuinely
Yes.
interested in their view, rather than me just telling you my view.
Yep.
Tell me what you think. I want to hear what you think.
Exactly.
Very few people will walk away from that.
Yep. You, I've told my students this, you might be the one person in their life, or at least the one person who's anytime recently who's asked and actually cared about what they think about the biggest questions of life. Their family probably hasn't even done that. And so it's a huge way you can care for people. Questions are caring as well. That's a great point. And so two that I use a lot are, what do you mean by that, and how did you come to that conclusion, right? But that's just, you shouldn't always say it that way, like it's Ken, or right? Just contextually, whatever they say, apply it to that, and say, I'm curious, what do you exactly mean by this, or what you said there? How did you come to that? When did you first start believing that, right? And so those are really good ones. But you can really make any statement that you were going to make any point into a question. So quickly back to this, I wanted to make a point. So some of you guys did do that because you'd been through tactics, right? And you were like, what do you mean? But a lot of you too, when you were saying your response, it was a statement that you responded with. You're like, well, here's the evidence for this. This is why that statement's wrong. And so my point is, I just wanted to reinforce my point that we tend to go towards statements when we're responding to something instead of asking the question. So for this one, you really want to ask, what do you mean by faith, right? Because they're assuming in this question that faith is blind, it seems to be, or doesn't have evidence, right? What do you mean by faith, right? How do you come to the conclusion that belief in the Bible isn't based on, is just blind? There's no evidence for it, right? What do you mean by rational explanation, right? What do you mean by evolution? How do you come to the conclusion that evolution is a rational explanation, right? So you can really break this down. There's so many questions and variations that you could go with, and so that's the approach we need to have with all of these. With these, and you guys really got a lot of these. Like the fetus, what do you mean by, you could ask them to define person, right? When does a person begin? What do you mean by person? Or how do you come to the conclusion that self-awareness, is what defines a person, who a person is. And so, for that one, you don't even have to, the religious claim you accept without proof is kind of just like a, that's another thing. You have to learn to kind of ignore irrelevant things. People will attack on stuff that's kind of really an ad hominem, or just like a kind of more personal attack. And just, it's important to ignore, kind of blow past this and look and just kind of address what the claim that they were making that actually was about reality. So there's that one. For the other one, we could go through all these, but what do you mean by faith? It works in that one too. How do you come to the conclusion that the Gospels are a bunch of stories, right? So we got those. And here we go, the second one. Listen to truly understand, not just to respond, right? So even when we ask, the danger is we can move to asking questions, right? And that's good, but then one thing that I would do a lot is I would ask a question, but then I would only listen to try and take down their answer, right? I wasn't listening to truly understand where they're coming from and treating them as a person and understanding why they think the way they do. I just wanted to listen so I could know how to take down what they thought. And that's not a good approach. You need to truly like want genuinely kind of what you were saying earlier. That's the way you care for people. You show love, is really listening and caring about and so asking follow-up questions, not just like getting their answer then attacking it, but then really asking them to explore that for you is great. But that's so important. Third, don't try to save them. Put a stone in their shoe. So I'm not saying don't share the gospel, right? But first of all, you're not the one saving them. But second of all, what I mean by this is your attitude shouldn't be, your goal in every conversation shouldn't be, oh, I've got to drag them to the foot of the cross in this conversation. Because if you do that, you're going to be really let down and really discouraged, and it's going to be hard. Just put a stone in their shoe. Just get them thinking. Especially like here in our culture, we're in the Bible Belt, a lot of people are very jaded towards religion. They've heard the gospel, or they think they've heard the gospel at least, or before. And so it's important to find out where they are, right, by asking questions and truly listening, and then trying to get them thinking about, from knowing where they are now, meeting them where they are, trying to get them thinking about something that is an issue for them, whatever that issue is. So Greg, this is a quick clip by Greg that I have where he talks about this. If it'll play.
I got an airplane a week ago tomorrow, flew to Chicago, and sitting next to me was a young man, actually he's about 32, newly married, no kids, just kind of stretching his wings professionally, interesting guy. Raised as a Christian, as a pastor's kid, PK. He was no longer a Christian. His dad was no longer a Christian. He had completely abandoned the faith and actually thought that Christianity was somewhat offensive. Began to share some of his problems there. Now this guy, if I would have gotten to the simple gospel with this guy, what would he have said? Been there, done that. This man was just dripping with wounds that Christians and Christianity, as he's encountered it, had inflicted upon him as an individual. And so you can see there are all kinds of barriers there. There are people who have objections and concerns. They can't make sense of the Christian message. They've heard it, many of them, not everybody, but they can't make sense of it. So there are all kinds of these obstacles that are in the way, and if our goal is to get right to the foot of the cross in a conversation, we're running right over the top of these individuals who have genuine needs and genuine questions and genuine confusions. So I'm sitting next to the gentleman on the airplane, Joseph, last week. I'm thinking, put a stone in his shoe. This guy's hurting. This guy's got baggage. I can't go the distance with him, even in a 3-hour flight to Chicago from LA, but I can give him something to think about. And in fact, at the end of the conversation, he said to me, he said, a lot of guys like you who would hear some of the things that I had to say would get all upset and angry. He said, but it's nice talking to you. In fact, he gave me his email address. Is that trust? Here's the guy sitting there with the Bible open, and he's given me his email address because that's the way it went. Because I employed a game plan.
Yeah, one of the things I don't have there is be prepared. That's another point. But I stopped at 10. but yeah, being prepared is good too. But yeah. So he's just kind of reinforcing that point, right? That person had heard the gospel before. He was a pastor's kid, in fact. And if he had just gone straight to the gospel and just started trying to share the gospel with them again, he's not really caring for that person as far as trying to understand where they're at right now, why they're thinking the way they are, why they're at the point they are spiritually, right? And so instead of doing that, he did that. He tried to understand where he was coming from. He gave him something to think about. Tried to draw him closer. Fourth, find common ground. So this past summer, when I was in Boone, we did a good bit of evangelism, and one conversation in particular was kind of crazy. It was like almost 5 hours, longest conversation I've had doing outreach before. Almost 5 hour long conversation with a lady who's agnostic and her husband who was a hostile atheist. Was like Christianity is a cult. You're an idiot for believing it. How old are you? Oh, you're 25. Oh, you'll understand. When you're older, you'll wise up. Not kidding. Super hostile. But his wife was open, and so I might have ended the conversation earlier because he just wasn't very open if it wasn't for his wife. But his wife was open and listening the whole time to everything we were talking about. But anyway, near the end of this conversation, he really had dominated a lot of it once he came in. We originally were talking with her, and she was really just telling us her story. And really, she was talking about, it was really heartbreaking. She had grown up in the church. She had actually helped lead in the church. She had been in a Catholic church and then Baptist church. And so really wanted to be involved, wanted to help lead. And a direct quote from her is, I had all these questions and no one could give me any answers. And eventually she left. And there were other things too, like she'd been mistreated. The churches she was part of were very corrupt. So just a really bad experience in churches that really, the church should be something that draws people towards Christ, but in this case, it really had kind of pushed her away. If she was being honest, which I had no reason to doubt, she was very genuine about it. But she was actually one of those people, when we didn't even have to ask our four kind of questions. She just launched as soon as she heard we were asking about people's opinions. She was telling her story. But anyway, I can't tell the whole part. He came home from the grocery store, and she had just been talking about how like her husband's like super hostile towards Christianity, and then like he shows up, and we're like, oh no. And he at first like wants us to, he's like, what are you guys doing here? No soliciting. We're like, whoa. And of course, I was so caught off guard because no one, even though there's no soliciting rules, no one had really ever enforced that with me. Like, at least not the people I'm talking to. Maybe it's like the apartment headquarters to say like, you guys need to leave. That's fine. But never had that happened to me in person from the person that we're talking to. And so, of course, my first response is, what do you mean by soliciting? That's actually what I said because it was just like instinctual. But anyway, that was only like 30 minutes in, and we're still there. I'm still there like 4 hours later. And he's just like throwing all this stuff, and he's very hostile, but she's listening the whole time. But then near the end, like say the last 45 minutes to an hour, she starts to ask some questions, and he finally shuts up, which was great because she hadn't been able to like talk at all. But anyway, she was asking questions, and one of the questions she started asking questions like, would we allow a homosexual to come to our church, to someone who's homosexual to join our church, become a member? So we were talking about that. And then, it was actually, that was after that. Yeah. So she asked that question, and that kind of gets into, well, why, I wasn't just going to give a yes or no answer, but I was, why does the church take this stance on sexuality? And so I explained to them as, well, first I asked them, what do you, she was like, that's not loving, right? That position. And so, I asked her, well, what do you think, what do you define love as? And they didn't really have an answer for that. And so I suggested, well, I think a good definition for love would be acting for the best, an action, right? Sacrificial action for the best of another person. Would you agree with that? And they're like, yeah, and they're married, so they understood that, because if you're married, then you know that it's not just feelings, it's actually action, and acting even when you don't feel that way, right? And so they agreed with my definition of love, that love is sacrificial action for the best of another person. So I was finding common ground.
And I was like, so we agree on that. Really, what we're disagreeing about is just what's best for people. What is best for the other person. And if God is real, and if God has a design for sexuality, and a design for romance, and he's designed it to be within a covenantal relationship between a man and a woman, then that's not unloving, it's just what's best for us. And that didn't convince them to become Christians or anything like that, but you could tell, like, okay, I understand. Given that you believe this, right, Christian, you believe that there's a God, you believe there's a good God and a good design in Christianity, it makes more sense. And the reason why I know that wasn't awful for her, and I think established a little bit of common ground, because she asked more questions after that. She wasn't just like, oh, you're hateful and you take that, because I explained that is the stance on homosexuality, but she still wanted to keep talking. And so that's a way to find common ground, right? That's important. And it's not going to necessarily, they're not going to just fall on their knees and accept Christ necessarily, but it's something that gets them thinking, puts a stone in their shoe, right? And so that's important. Answer the person, not just the question. So there's a person behind every question. And the question they're asking may not actually be like what they're going through, right? There is a person who was a really hostile atheist who I talked to, I think, about a year ago. And she'd been talking to a campus preacher on campus, and then I joined in, and we ended up meeting up another time and talking. And she threw out like every objection you hear, like to the resurrection, like hallucination and all of that, hallucination, swing theory, problem of evil, all these things. But then I find out the reason that she grew up as a Christian, the reason why she's an atheist now is because she grew up in a church that was kind of Pentecostal that believed in healings, and she got cerebral palsy. She has cerebral palsy when I met her. And they had said, well, we're going to heal you. And of course it didn't work. And so she's so hurt and angry at God for allowing that, or she just doesn't believe he exists at all because of that misconception and that wrong teaching in her church. So she had all these intellectual objections, and there is an actual intellectual component of that, yes, but it really wasn't. It was really much more this hurt of people that she trusted, a community that she trusted letting her down, than it was, she just had all these intellectual reasons that she left. That wasn't the reason she left. She put all those barriers up after she decided to leave. So a lot of this apologetics is just taking away, removing those barriers so you can get to the real issue. And so remember, sometimes it's more important like why the person asked that question than the question they asked. So sometimes it's good to ask someone, I'm curious, why did you ask that question? Especially if it's the problem of evil, because if it's the problem of evil, it's probably personal. Or it's someone they know at least. So that's super important. 6, remember that a majority of doubt is emotional. That kind of ties to what we just talked about, but Gary Habermas kind of talks about this. I think he estimates that like 60-70% of doubt is more emotional than it is intellectual. So again, like there's maybe all these intellectual barriers, but there's likely some emotional things that are going on. And here in the Bible Belt, a lot of that is hurt from the church. They grew up in the church and they were hurt by the church. And so a question I ask that's good to ask too is like, what is your experience with Christianity? Because generally people have some sort of experience with Christianity around here. So that's important. Know your opponent. And a better word for this would be know the opposing ideas. Know the opposing ideas. Know what really struggle with and wrestle with, and even if they're not objections you yourself struggle with, really inhabit them and try and understand why. Like make the argument. I was talking with someone. She was a classmate of mine a year ago, and we still talk sometimes. Actually, I think we're going to try and meet up this week. But she, we were in a class called Life Without God, which is kind of like an atheist apologetic class. And yeah, it was really interesting. It was challenging, but it was good. And she was in that as well. And she didn't come in religious. She came in like secular Jewish. She was Jewish, but not practicing. And so, but then I ran into her at Chipotle. Because she worked at Chipotle, like, and I was going the next semester. I was going to Chipotle with my youth pastor, and ran into her in the line, and she was like, that class really wrecked me. And like, she had not talked to me the whole semester, but for some reason she talked to me in the Chipotle line. And she was like, that class like really wrecked my life. And I was like, really? It's interesting. You want to meet up and talk about it? And so we ended up getting coffee like a little bit later. And because I was like, she didn't come in religious, why did this class, make that much impact on her? But she said she'd been clinging on to this idea of that everything happens to her for a reason. And once that class kind of caused her to believe that there's nothing happens for a reason. There's no, it's all physical causes. There's no reason behind anything, and that caused her to spiral into depression. And her boyfriend broke up with her, and just had a really rough time. But anyway, I got to use that example for another point. But my point with that one is a little bit later we were together at like a friend's house because we had some mutual friends, and she brought up evolution. So I was just kind of asking her. We were just kind of talking about like, well, what what do you think is true? You know, what worldview do you have? And she was like, well, evolution, that's for sure true. That was like one of the things she's really certain about. That's true. And so I asked her, well, what's the best evidence you think? What do you think the best evidence is for evolution then? And she didn't really have an answer. She didn't know. She said, no, can't really think of anything. And so what I did is I made the case for her. I said, you know, well, there's this person who sent an email to Richard Dawkins and asked him what the best evidence for evolution is, and he said the universality of the genetic code. And so I was making the case for her, right? I knew her position better than she knew it. And so I kind of made the case for her, but then I said, but the fact that there's a genetic code that's so similar, universal, that fits just as much in with the hypothesis of a designer, a common designer, as it does with any type of like common ancestor, right? And so it's a good something I've learned is if you know the position often, you'll know more about it than the skeptic. And if you can get to that point, that's going to be really helpful. It'll help you because they'll understand, oh, well, this person isn't, you know, they have really engaged with these. Like, it's not just like, oh, they're just having their stance and they don't consider other points of view, right? That's really good. Remember, God is sovereign and the results are up to him. Mm-hmm. We're just called to be faithful. We're not in charge of the results. Like, if you put that pressure on yourself, you're not going to have as good of conversations, and it's going to be really rough for you. Don't put that pressure on yourself, but do put the pressure on yourself of going out and talking to people. Just do it. Like, you're surrounded by people. Be faithful in that, but remember the results are up to God. If you present the truth, and if you're working and you're preparing, you know, you're trying to get better and better, and you're going out and doing it, God's going to honor that. He's going to use that, even when you don't see results. He's going to use that. Be willing to admit you don't know something. If you hear something you've never heard before, rather than trying to struggle to give an answer that you don't really know is true, just say, you know, that's interesting. I've never heard that before, or I'm not really sure how to respond to that. Can I get back to you on it? Or can you tell me more about it? That's going to be much better than you trying to defend it, because it shows them that you're actually willing to have a conversation, willing to consider their point of view. You're willing to admit that you're not perfect. You're fallible, right? No one's perfect. No one has a corner on the truth. You have to be willing to show that you're willing to consider their points of view and not just say like, oh, this is what I believe, I'm going to defend it no matter what, right? So that's really helpful. It's kind of counterintuitive because you think, oh, if you don't have this answer, that means, you know, my case is not going to be as good. But really, they're going to appreciate that. And if they're actually interested, they're probably going to want to be more willing to talk to you again, since you're willing to admit that.